My name is Danica Lombardazzi, and I'm a scientist at the National Center for Atmospheric Research. One part of my research focuses on how ground level ozone impacts plant processes. And so as part of that, I've set up a couple of ozone gardens here in Boulder, helped establish those. And then we have partnered to try and make a national and international network of ozone gardens. And so for me, the thing that is exciting about ozone gardens is that they're a really nice tool to be able to look at a plant and actually be able to see a visible impact from an invisible air pollutant. And so that's one nice thing that visitors can really start to understand and see the impacts that air pollution can have. But then also I'm excited to use these as a citizen science data collection system, and I'll talk a little bit about that. And part of the reason I'm excited about that is because then we can use the gardens as a tool to better understand how ozone impacts plants, both through space and through time. And so I think that is a really neat application, and also engaging visitors to the garden in citizen science it really helps them to remember that ozone impacts plants, and I think it allows them to more deeply connect to that concept. So I'll start by sharing my screen. So I will share this, and then I will go into presenter mode. And so any of you other garden folks, please jump in if there are things that I miss, and please feel free to ask questions at any point in time. You can do that by asking a question or by putting a question in the comments box, and we'll try to monitor that. So this is a meeting of all the ozone bioindicator gardens in our network that I'm aware of. And if there are other gardens that you guys know of that would like to join our network, please let us know. And so this is just a picture of the ozone bioindicator garden at the front entrance of NCAR that we use here for educational and citizen science purposes. So we have a lot of different gardens in the network. So this includes a lot of the gardens that have been in existence are on this map. And then we also have new, there we go, new gardens in 2019. So that is also very exciting. There's a garden going in Fort Collins. There's one at Denver University. Phipps Botanical Garden has also expressed interest in Spelman College. And so I'm just going to flip back to this slide. If you're not on this map or on that list, but want to be, please let us know, because we would really like to be able to add you to our growing network of ozone bioindicator gardens. I think one of our goals, and I'll talk about this later, is to make a map that is a little bit more interactive so that we can more easily update things. So I think that was, yeah. So next, I just also wanted to talk about the fact that we lost one of our valuable members of our community. John Skelly was a retired professor from Penn State University, and he just died this year in March. John was really fundamental to the ozone bioindicator gardens. He provided seeds and cuttings for many of the gardens. But beyond that, he just provided an invaluable source of knowledge and the history, really, of ozone, trying to understand the impact of ozone on plants. He just had an incredible history of knowledge. And so he is definitely going to be missed in many ways. But thinking about the fact that John is no longer around to provide seeds for our gardens and cuttings, we have decided that we should make our bioindicator garden seed bank a little bit more robust by trying to find many locations that can cultivate seeds. And that way, if one garden has problems with herbivores, or for some reason the plants get damaged and can't provide seeds, then maybe we have another source of seeds that we can provide. So if you have the capability to help with seeds and or cuttings, the potatoes are not really seeds, they're tubers. You have to send it. If you have this capability and you're willing to help, please let us know. Like I said, we'd like to find a few different sites that can provide this service for us. So let us know if you think that that's something possible. So next, so we have a variety of near-term projects that are coming up. So this is, I guess I should have started by saying, I'm gonna start with, I didn't put an outline slide in it, maybe I should have, but I'm starting with sort of Ozone Garden Network updates, and then I'll talk a little bit next about the data collection, and then I've asked Liz Burakowski to talk about a project that she's done at some of her ozone gardens. So that's the structure. But to go back to garden updates, we have several available resources, including data files for signs. We have data collection worksheets, which I'll talk a little bit more about. We also have a garden manual for how to set up a garden that can help you get started if you haven't started yet. So those are things that are available. There's probably other things that I'm forgetting that we do have but don't have on this list. We also have several near-term projects that we're excited to develop, and this is a really slow process since we don't have a lot of funding for the Ozone Garden Network. But some of those near-term projects include a photo repository, both of the gardens themselves. So like some of these pictures you see down here, we like to be able to include photos of your gardens in our talks. But also of damage on leaves, or even things that might not be damaged that could look like damage, or healthy leaves. I think that those are, all of those are very helpful. So we're hoping to put that together. As I mentioned, we'd also like to make an interactive garden map. I sort of envision this as each garden has a point on the map, and then maybe it can have a photo that's associated with that garden, and maybe a contact person for that garden in case somebody wants to get in touch. But again, this is work in progress and open to suggestions. I'd also like to continue working on developing a website for the Garden Network. We don't have one yet, so it would be nice to do that. And last, we are still continuing to develop a lot of materials, and so having a website for material access and for sharing so that all of the gardens can access and share materials that they have developed, I think will be great. Is there anything else that I've forgotten? Anyone? No? Okay. So next I'll switch into the ozone damage data collection. So I just want to highlight, I'm going to show here two photos, and I hope that you can see these. This series of photos here is the progression of ozone damage on a cutleaf coneflower, which is our Rudbeckia lacunata species. And so all the way on the left is early in the growing season, and you can see that the leaf looks pretty healthy. I didn't zoom in too much on this leaf because I didn't see very much ozone damage, any ozone damage, I guess, early in the growing season. And then the middle leaf is sort of some moderate, starting to become moderate damage later on in the growing season. And then by the end of the growing season, the leaf on the right, again, it's not zoomed in very much, but you can see all the, I guess I can use my mouse. You can see that there's large sections of damage that you can see on this leaf. And this is a pretty close-up shot, but here's the stipples. And so the damage, I know that several of you know this, but it starts as stipples. And so it starts as these tiny dots on the top surface of the leaf. And that's what you're looking for. But the damage actually looks quite different if you are looking at a different species of plant. And so I would say that on, at least in the gardens that we have here in Boulder, we have cutleaf coneflower and we have milkweed, that the damage looks like this. And then we have the chipper potato and the snap bean, and the damage looks a little bit different on these kinds of plants. So these are some images of the chipper potato. And so again, on, I don't know if you can see my mouse, I hope you can, but on the left, this is in August of one of the years we planted the garden. So this is damage that has just started on these potato leaves, and by about 2 weeks later, we're starting to get more widespread damage. And then towards the end of the growing season, this last photo on the right is in September. And so you can see that the damage is pretty extensive on these potato plants. And so this, to me, when I was first looking at the ozone damage on the potato plants, these spots are much bigger, so it didn't look as obvious to me that it was ozone damage. And so it does look very different on the agricultural species than it does on some of the native or the more natural species that we have that are not always cultivated. So were there any questions so far? No? Okay.
Does anybody have any questions about identifying injury and damage? You know, we have some new members of the garden network with us.
Yeah. And
I had a hard time identifying damage. I didn't get to visit the garden as much as I had liked. We did take some pictures that I guess we'll get to later in the slideshow. I don't think they were ozone damage because they didn't start off as black stipples.
Yeah.
But yeah, we can get to that. So
yeah. Well, and so it is really hard to identify because it is different on the different plants. And I'm happy to, if people have images, this is in part what we're hoping the photo repository is for, or can help with. You can take photos and we can hopefully help to identify, but you're welcome to send me photos if you have a question. And I actually find that it is actually really hard to take photos of ozone damage, but you know, I can try to take a look, and if you can tell me what species it is, I'm happy to share what I think. And it was, you know, the first year I actually had to email John quite a bit for the damage on the potatoes, because the damage that was developing did look like damage that I had seen in photos, but it didn't look like the classic symptoms of ozone damage that I had seen in my research so far. And so the damage here, the spots, if you don't catch these tiny spots right away, part of the reason why I'm excited about doing, having the citizen science data collection is because the damage looks different on the potato, but I also think that the potato has much more of a threshold response. And I will say this is also true with the snap bean. And so once you start to see the damage, it does not take very long for the damage to really develop into some of this more extensive looking damage. And so it's hard to tell, because if you don't catch it right when the stipples are starting, you're going to think that maybe it's something else, compared to if I just, the other way, flip back to the cutleaf coneflower, the damage seems to be a much more linear progression, and it doesn't ever, at least at the ambient levels that we've had here in Boulder, it doesn't turn into those large necrotic or dead spots on the leaf as much, you know, like with really large patches of dead tissue. It just continues to look like stipples throughout most of the growing season. So it is, the response is different on the different plant types, and I think that that is an important thing to note, but it also, it's part of the reason why I think it's exciting to collect data on the different plant species so that we can understand how different plants might be responding differently to very similar ozone concentrations that they're seeing. So I don't know if that helps to answer your question, but you know, I'm happy to try and help as a resource to, you know, once I think you can start to identify what ozone damage looks like, then it's, and it will be easier to continue to identify it in the future. We are trying to put together some resources that help with training a little bit, and that it's part of the reason why on the data collection worksheets, we do try to include some images of what the damage looks like. But, you know, additional resources if you need them or want them, and please let us know how we can best help to provide that information.
And I'll be
Do you know about the ICP vegetation app?
Oh yes, that was the other thing that I was going to mention.
Okay.
Yes, thank you. The ICP vegetation app, and I'm happy to send a link to this app, but it is an app where you actually take a picture, and an expert, so this is not an app that is affiliated specifically with our garden network, but I've been trying to get in touch with them to see if we can be more closely connected. I haven't heard back from anybody affiliated with the app development, but you take a picture of a leaf and you can send it, you upload it to the app, and then they will identify, somebody will get back to you and say whether or not this is ozone damage.
What's it called again?
It's the ICP, and I don't know what that stands for. It's ICP vegetation. Okay. And we can send out the link. I'll have to make myself a mental note to remember to send out the link to this app. because that can also help to identify ozone damage. Maria, I don't know if you have ever been in touch with any of those people, but I don't get any email responses, and I would love to connect with them. I know that Gina Mills, who developed the app, retired, and then I just haven't been able to get in touch with anybody new.
Let me know, because I'm in touch with them. Actually.
Yeah, I would love to. If you would help us get in touch, that would be really.
Yeah, I can try to make the connection. Actually, they asked me also to use the ICP app for my garden here. So
yeah, and when I talked to Gina, we had talked about that.
It took a couple of it took a couple of weeks for them to get me back at me. So, but I can try to make the link since they are based here in the UK.
Yeah, that would be great. Yes, so we have Ozone Garden worksheets for citizen science data collection, and so this is the front page, or part of the front page. I've sort of condensed some of the material so that it fits better on this slide. But basically, we provide this front page that has a little bit about how to identify ozone injury on plants and talking about stipples. And then these photos are an attempt to provide some sort of basic starting points of stipples from the garden, and also the different plants that we have in our garden. And so we have these worksheets, and we have the raw files if you need them if you want them for your garden, and or if you need them to be updated for your garden, let us know, and we can try and work with you to get worksheets that will be useful for your gardens. And then, so this is the second worksheet, and this is, for me, the exciting worksheet, because I feel like this is where many of our usable data come from. And so this is, I've sort of cut and pasted things so that everything's not quite in order. But basically, on this worksheet, what we ask people to do is to select one of the plants and then go through the injury scores. So we ask them to randomly select 10 leaves on the plant. They don't have to do it all at the, they don't have to select the leaves first, but to go through on 10 random leaves and estimate the % of the leaf area that has visible ozone damage. And so we have a category, our category is from 1 to 6, and this is based largely on what folks at the Great Smokies National Park have been doing, and they've been collecting data for more than a decade. And so this is all sort of based on the data that they've collected and updated to make it a little bit easier for citizen scientists to collect the data. But that's what the scale is based on. And so, you know, when you start seeing stipples, if you don't have any ozone injury, the damage score is 1. If you start to see stipples, you know, so that there's a little bit of damage, that's a category 2. You know, and then as the damage sort of progresses throughout the season, you start to get to higher injury scores. And these are just leaves that I sort of photoshopped damage onto. And so the damage can look different on different plant types, but it's just to try and give you a sense for where the category, or what the category falls in based on the way that the ozone damage looks. And so once somebody fills out this data collection worksheet for 10 leaves, then we ask people to upload these online. So this is actually a weak point in our system, and I am hoping that at some point in time we have the resources to be able to develop an app or some sort of easier online interface so that people can actually just enter the information themselves on a smartphone, or, you know, in some other way. We can still use the paper data collection worksheets, but maybe we can have a website that directly connects to the database that we have. I think that would be really useful. So it's definitely a priority. It's just a matter of finding the resources to do that. So you can collect these data for any number of plants. Oftentimes the way that this data collection works at NCAR, I try to go out every week so that I have a consistent record of what my data collection would be through time. And so if I go out every week, sometimes I miss weeks, which is okay. But if I try to go out every week, then I know that I have collected these data, and this is what I see as the injury score on these plants. And so that, given the statistical analysis that we have to do. I think that that helps us have sort of this one consistent person, because then the way that it works at NCAR is we'll have a group come through and we'll get 10 people collecting data or 20 people collecting data on one day. And so trying to, and they're citizen scientists. And so what we do is we use a Bayesian statistical approach, which basically requires that it doesn't require, but it's helpful to have an expert prior is what it's called. And so if you have somebody who has been going out and collecting data through time, that's sort of the baseline for approximately what you think the data are. And then because there is going to be some variability in who categorizes damage score based on what leaf, or, and so there's going to be some of that subjectivity that you can help to account for by having that one person that has been collecting data consistently through time. But then we'll get, 10 entries, for example, on one type of plant and on one day. And so that's nice because it gives us extra data, but then it'll go in big pulses. So we'll have students, a group come through, 1 week, and then maybe 3 weeks later, we'll get another group that comes through giving us different data. And so that's just the way that the data collection works, and that's fine. But you use a new worksheet for each different type of plant and for each observer. Really helps. You can have, if you have a lot of students, they can work in teams to fill this out. That's also fine. But then once the data are collected, our current online database is in the hands on the land database. And so this is what the original ozone garden at Great Smokies, which is called the Purchase Knob Ozone Garden, that's it's what they have entered. And so there's a couple of things that I want to point out, and we can go into this website and sort of do a live interactive session if we want. I don't know if people would like that. But so basically, this image shows you what you pull up if you do not have, if you're not logged in already. And so you can search for the data in this website, but once you log in, there will be a little button up here that says add data. And so then you can add data, and this is something that we can do in the website. But I wanted to, one of the things that I wanted to show was once you enter the data, it will come up like this. So it's a public database. And so there's a few, so I'll point out this one, this data collection on August 16th. There's 5 here in this 0 score. And if it's 0, it basically means that we have no data, because the lowest score when you have no ozone injury on a leaf is 1. And so 1 means that there's no ozone injury. So this particular year, or this particular observation, probably only collected data on 5 leaves and not 10. And that's okay. You don't need all 10 necessarily. It's nice to have all 10, but that's what a 0 score means in here. And so here there were no leaves that had no ozone damage. There were 3 leaves that had between 1% and 6% damage, so probably a few stipples on them. And then there was 1 leaf on this particular, this is a coneflower, so there was 1 leaf here that had more damage, category 3 and then category 4. So that's, there's the collector name. If so Eric is the person who is collecting these data through time at UCCS, so he entered his name. I will enter my name for the Ozone Garden at Boulder, but if there's a group of kids that come through, I just enter citizen for the other names. And so that's, that way we know that it's just a group of citizen scientists that came through. We don't need any identifying information from them to collect the data. Would folks like to go into the hands on the land now, or maybe we should do that at the end in case, so that folks can jump off if they don't want to go through this?
I'd like to see a demo, but we can wait till the end if we want.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, maybe we should wait to the end just so that if people aren't interested in the demo, they can jump off of the call. So we'll go through.
We'll record it.
Yeah, we can still record it. Yeah. We'll go through the demo at the end. And so this is just this is data from the oh no, I can't. Tropospheric Ozone Assessment Report, there you go, TOR. And so this is, Owen Cooper is one of the people that's been leading the charge here. He's at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. He's actually based here in Boulder, which is convenient for me to be able to talk to him about this. And this map just shows what the EPA limit is for ozone, which is 70 parts per billion over the course of 8 hours. And the EPA checks the fourth highest 8-hour average to see if it's above 70 parts per billion, and that's how they decide if you are in or out of compliance. So the standard was updated in 2015. It used to be 75, but it's currently not being enforced, that new standard. But basically what I want to show you is that there's a lot of places in the US that have pretty high ozone concentration. So this is the metric for what EPA regulates, all of these dots. And you can see the colors. This is actually a little fuzzy, but you can see the colors. So anything that's in these sort of warm yellow, orange, red colors, that's out of compliance with the current EPA standards. The other thing that I would like to point out is that there's a lot of biological variability, but for the most part, the plants are sort of thought to show signs of damage or exhibit damage starting around 40 parts per billion. So these blue colors as well, anywhere where you see the blue colors are places where plants can have damage. So that's almost everywhere in the US. And so there is potential for damage in a lot of places. I live here in Colorado, and in Boulder's Front Range, we have been out of compliance with the EPA standards for over a decade. But just so you have a sense, you know, these orange colors, I'm seeing significant bioindicator or significant damage on the gardens that are at NCAR in these sort of orange bands. And so anywhere where you're orange, I think it's probably likely that you will see damage. And I don't have as much data from, or I haven't looked at least from gardens that are closer to green spots, but I would expect to see some damage at those sites as well. That said, so I know that not all gardens have ozone monitors. If you have the capability to have an ozone monitor at your garden, that is fantastic. And I would actually, we don't have the capability of storing the data on the Hands on the Land website, but I would, if you have ozone data that you're collecting at your garden, let me know, because I would love to work out another database that we can put those ozone concentration data in, because it helps us to connect the damage at the leaf level with the ozone concentrations. If you don't, it's okay, because we have this database, the Tropospheric Ozone Assessment Report database, that has been monitoring data. And so we could just pull any of these points that are, whatever point is closest to your garden, and we can monitor data, or we can get ozone concentration data from those particular points. It is, it's not going to be the most accurate estimate, but it will be sort of close and give us an idea of approximately what the ozone concentrations are. So that's another resource that is available if you don't have ozone data. So just to give you sort of a highlight in terms of the kind of data analysis that we've been doing, I've been working with Dorrit Hammerling here at NCAR, and she and I have been working with high school students to do some data analysis. So the photo of some of the more recent high school students that have worked on this is up in the left corner. It's Caden, Nita, and Sophia did some analysis for us on the Purchase Knob Garden, which is at the Great Smokies National Park. And so basically what they found, or what they looked at, was what is the proportion of leaves that are injured in each month. And so I am highlighting here just 2 of the years, and this figure actually has a lot of information in it. So I'll start with 2009, and in 2009, in July, almost all of the leaves had no ozone injuries in July. By August, there was a little bit of ozone injury on some of the leaves, and by September was when we saw the most ozone injury, and that's because ozone injury accumulates through time on particular leaves. And so there are still some leaves that don't have ozone injury, and that's because plants do grow new leaves throughout the growing season, and so you would expect a younger leaf might not have the same amount of ozone injury, but there's a higher proportion of leaves that do have at least some injury. And so that sort of illustrates that point. Now, if you compare 2009 with what we saw in 2010, you'll see that there's a lot of variability year to year. So some years are going to have higher ozone concentrations than other years. And so in 2010, there were higher ozone concentrations at this particular garden site. And so while the damage in July started out very similarly in both years, by August, there were a much higher fraction of leaves that had at least some damage. And then in September, there were hardly any leaves that didn't have damage. Almost all of the leaves had at least some damage. And so you can just really see that the damage accumulates through time, and also it varies year to year, which is why it's exciting to have this project and to have all of these gardens collecting data year after year, but also in different regions, because different locations are going to have different ozone concentrations. And so that gives us a sense for how the plants respond, and the data collection can be more robust with the more gardens that are collecting these data for us. So it gives us a sense to sort of connect the data with ozone damage and ozone concentrations as well. And so this is another figure that they put together for me. And this basically shows the proportion of leaves that had at least some ozone damage by September. And then so that's the y-axis, that's what this is there's it's basically thinking about the proportion, so how many leaves have damage out of all that we measured, and then connecting that with this cumulative, this is a metric called W126 in mid-September. And what this metric is it's just an accumulated ozone concentration. And that's the reason that we accumulate the ozone concentration, is because plants, the leaves sort of get the damage through time. And so that is potentially a better metric than just instantaneous ozone concentrations, which are quite variable. And then this particular metric, W126, uses a sigmoidal weighting function. And I know that that sounds fancy, but basically what it does is it just says the higher the ozone concentration is in the middle of the day, the more impact it might have on these plants. And that's because plants, they have the pores on their leaves, which are called stomata. They have the stomata open in the middle of the day so that they can gain carbon. You know, that's usually the time that they have their stomata most open, and that's also the time that the ozone concentrations tend to be the highest. And so when the ozone enters the leaf through these pores on the leaves, that's when the damage can actually occur to the plant. And so that's why this function is weighted so that it's more heavily weighted towards these growing season time of day, or the sort of peak time of day, I guess, when the ozone concentrations are highest and when the plants tend to be the most active. And so they looked across years. The first year of data collection at this garden was in 2003. So this is, like I said, been going, the data collection has been going for a really long time. And it was nice to see that there's a lot of variability here, but there is a statistically significant trend. With higher cumulative W126 values, you see a higher proportion of leaves showing total ozone damage. It'll be great to fill this plot in with more data once we have more data. Okay, so I'm gonna actually pass this over to Liz so that she can talk to us about one of the projects that she's been working on at her ozone gardens.
Unmute, there we go. Okay, so this was an experimental program last summer, and we had installed an ozone garden at the Dover Children's Museum, or Children's Museum of New Hampshire in Dover, New Hampshire. And the idea was to use a program, or a project idea that used purple glasses to help assist in the identification of ozone damage. Essentially, we have a set of glasses where I bought some purple film, and one second. Okay. So it was kind of a melding of arts and crafts and changing. Corey, I need you to not know. Sorry. All right, sorry. So we did this, I think it was 3 different times was one that I led, and then Coley, I believe you also led one as well. I think she's on chat, so we'll see if we hear from her. Could you do next slide?
Yep. Okay. It's slow, sorry.
Okay. So this was just some photos of just general damage. I don't think this was actually ozone damage.
Yeah, I would agree that I didn't see much that looked like ozone damage, but yes.
But what you can see is that the spots certainly do get highlighted here. I wasn't able to get any photos later on in the season of actual ozone damage using the glasses, but it becomes much more apparent where there is some sort of damage on the leaves themselves. Next slide.
I think that was all that you...
Oh, that was all. I thought I had something more. Okay. Anyway, so I also I put together like a worksheet for the students or for whoever's leading the activity to go through with the students. We had little cards as well that had little pictures on them to kind of explain the science behind this and why this sort of activity might work to help assist in the identification. So it's something I'd like to continue pursuing. This was originally, I had found it through Digital Earthwatch, which was another citizen science program many years ago, to identify just any damage in leaves. I don't think it had to do specifically with ozone. But the students really had a great time making the glasses. We definitely had some really fun shapes and sizes that we put together. So it's something I'd like to continue developing and refining. But yeah, it was pretty fun to do.
Yeah, I think it seems like a really useful tool to potentially identify ozone damage, and I'm excited to continue trying it this year.
Yeah.
If folks are interested in doing this, can they get in touch with you and or maybe if you could provide some of that information back to the Ozone Garden Network, we can make it so that we can distribute it more easily.
Yeah, so I'll send you the Word document and the PDF version, and that way, if you guys want to make some edits to it, we can do that iteratively.
Okay.
I'll also, when I come to NCAR this summer, I'll bring some of the purple film with me, and then we can play around with making glasses up there and maybe see some. I'll have an expert there to help me identify ozone damage.
Yeah, so we can look at what is ozone damage, because I know that we definitely see ozone damage quite a bit at NCAR. So this will be a nice way to sort of combine and test those things out.
Yeah.
Very exciting.
Liz, this is Mary. Is there a particular Roscoe gel number for the purple?
Yep, I have that all written down. I tried out 2 or 3 different types as well. I had used, one was like a magenta, one was a little bit more purpley, but I have the which one worked best written down.
Great.
Yeah.
And Coley's shared in the chat where she found some of the eyeglass outlines. So
yes, we did like cat eyes. We did John Lennon like circular or Harry Potter-esque. I think I also did like some aviators. It was fun. We had a great time with it.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing, and thanks for testing that out.
Yeah.
Yeah, if anybody else has projects or things that they've done at the museum that have worked for them, please let us know. It would be really exciting to be able to share more widely across the Ozone Gardens, so that other people can use those resources that you've worked so hard to develop. Okay, so there's just a few more slides before we go into before we do the live demonstration. And the first, I just wanted to highlight that NASA Roses sent out an email about funding for citizen science. In the past, they've had an explicit call that has been for citizen science, and they haven't done that in many years, actually. And so this year, what they said is that they're highlighting the Science Mission Directorate policy that invites people to incorporate citizen science into their research. And so any NASA Roses proposer is going to be asked a question in the Inspires system. So that's the proposal submission system, to indicate if their proposals incorporate citizen science components. And so if anybody is thinking about putting together a NASA Roses proposal, I would sort of argue and advocate that the ozone gardens are a great citizen science tool. So especially if we're looking at, if this proposal looks at sort of air quality components. A few years ago when we put together, before the network was really more widely established, we put together a citizen science call that we were hoping to get funding to start some new gardens and for ozone monitors and to develop this mobile app for the garden so that we could more directly use it. And the proposal was viewed actually very, very favorably. It just, the primary reason why it didn't get funded is because it didn't connect enough to any of the NASA satellite missions, the current satellite missions. So there's the future mission that will, the satellite will be launched. It's the Tempo mission that Erica and Mary are closely connected with. And so that satellite is, I don't know exactly when it's slated to launch, but it will be launched, and it will provide pretty high resolution estimates of ground level ozone concentrations at, I think, hourly timescales. You're welcome to correct me if I'm wrong. And I think, you know, I really see the Ozone Gardens being able to connect very, very well with that mission. It's just that it's not launched yet. I do have a few other ideas for how to connect to other satellite missions, but they're a little fuzzier. So, you know, I don't know that I necessarily have a plan to submit a NASA Roses proposal, but if I find a funding call, I will definitely incorporate the Ozone Gardens. And if anybody else is interested in writing a proposal or has thought about writing a proposal to NASA Roses and would like to incorporate some of the Ozone Garden citizen science, please let me know. It would be very exciting, I think. And then just last, there is another source of potential funding through the American Society of Plant Biologists. And Erica, maybe you could speak to this a little bit more since you were more aware of this opportunity.
Yeah, so I ran into them at a recent conference, and they provide funding, particularly if anybody's interested in writing curriculum for other sites to use. Their spring funding has closed, but they'll open it up again in the fall, and basically they have up to $50,000 per organization to offer folks to write full curriculum that they can then share out with others. So it's a great site, and for anybody that's already working on curriculum that wants to develop more stuff for their organization and is willing to share that, it's a great source for you.
Yeah, and I mean, let us know if there's any way that we can support you in writing these proposals. You know, you don't necessarily have to write in funding for all of the gardens, but if we can support you in some way to help make it more feasible, please let us know. And if you know of other funding opportunities that people could use, also please let us know so that we can share that with the Garden Network. Okay, so I think that's all I have in. Oh no, there's one more slide. Sorry, that I just wanted to share. I want to know from you guys if there are other resources that you would like for us to provide or that you think would be useful, and if there's just other general questions. And you know, we'll talk about this a little bit, and then we can sort of jump into a quick demo of the website and how to enter data after this. Does anybody have questions or suggestions for resources that would be really useful for your gardens? I think we answered everything really well then. Okay, well, if there are, and if things come up, please just let us know. I'm always happy to answer questions. If you wanted to email me, or if you have more in-depth questions, we can try and set up a time to talk over the phone or over a conference call. You can contact me, you can contact Erica, Mary and Becca are also good resources. You know, there's a lot of us that you are welcome to connect with that we can help answer some of these questions. Okay, so that said, I think that this is only sharing this particular screen. So here, I'm going to, can everybody still see this?
We're at the website.
Okay, great. All right, so just to give you a sense, you go to the website. So here in monitoring, you click on Ozone Bioindicator monitoring, and that's where we are right now. And so the first thing I'm gonna do is log in. And so my login name remembers me. I don't understand why it does that. So this just it brings up my profile. I find this a little hard to, I don't know why it brings me up here, but I always just go back to this Ozone Bioindicator monitoring. And then, so the National Park Service has at least what they have been doing at Great Smokies National Park is they've been following and tracking specific leaves through time, which is really hard to do in a citizen science context. And so that's why we have this other data entry right here, which is open. So this stands for Ozone Pollution Education Network. And so this is the data for our Garden Network site, the citizen science data. And so you can open this. And so again, this brings back sort of the screenshot that I showed before, where you have all of the data, and you can see that Eric did a great job of collecting a lot of data. There's a lot of pages of these data, so you can always search through here, or you can search in this if you want to look for old data. If you want to add data, you go to this little add button. So you say add, and then it brings up this worksheet. So if I'm adding data that I did not collect today, I want to make sure that I change this date to another date. So in my screen, it will remember that I've either had citizens collecting or I've been collecting. So if we say citizen, and then the only garden I'm affiliated with is the NCAR garden at this point, and then I have a bunch of different plant types here. If you have plants that are not included on this that you would like to add, I can ask David to add those for us, so please just let me know. So let's say coneflower. And so here's my 10 leaves, and so I say leaf 1 has a damage score of 1 because it didn't have any damage. Leaf 2 also didn't have any damage, but I saw a little bit of damage on leaf 3. Leaf 4 had actually quite a bit of damage, and leaf 5 didn't have any. And so I still, so as of now, I've only entered 5 leaves. Maybe I only collected 5 leaves. So that's why I have the other 5 leaves still have a damage score of 0. So that means that there's no data for those leaves. So just keep that in mind. If you have anything in 0, it just means that you don't have the damage. And then this is categorizing, or it's counting the number of leaves that are within each of these damage categories. And so I have 3 leaves that are in this damage category of 1, meaning that there's no ozone damage. I have 1 leaf that has a little bit of ozone damage. And so that's category 2. And then I don't have any in category 3, but I do have 1 in category 4. So let's say I have another leaf in category 4. You see that there's fewer leaves that have no data. And then there's an extra leaf in this category 4 because I have these 2, leaf 4 and leaf 7 are both category 4. It doesn't matter what order the leaves are in, I guess, is basically what this is saying. It just matters how many leaves have each of these damage scores. So when you're done with this, you will save it. I'm actually not going to save it because this is fake data that I made up. Please don't do this. So I'm just, if you click save, it will give you the same thing as go back. So I've entered one worksheet basically. So then I go back here, I can add another worksheet, select the species, maybe it's blackberry this time, even though we don't even have blackberries here. This is from today. And so I can go through and, it's pretty easy to go through and enter the data. It is a little bit time consuming, and I'm sorry, but I really appreciate the data. And so again, I'm not going to save this, but I could do this over and over again. We do have information. I've written up instructions and had Erica test them out for how to set up your garden and how to log in and do this so that you can have sort of a worksheet step-by-step guide as well. But hopefully this live demo sort of helps. So this website collects a lot of different citizen science projects, and so you can see that there's all these other projects in here, but this, for the gardens in particular, it's the monitoring, and then it's the ozone bioindicator monitoring.
Danica, just to clarify for some folks, so if one garden has 3 different snap bean plants and somebody measures all 3, they can just do the same thing over and it'll...
Yep, exactly.
Clarify that.
And, also to further clarify, your 10 leaves don't have to come from one plant, just one type of plant. So if you had 3 or 4 different snap bean plants and each of them only had a few leaves, maybe the plants didn't have more than 5 leaves at that point in time. You can sort of randomly select 10 leaves from across all of those different plants, but within the same plant species, if that makes sense. So, I mean, you're welcome to look at just one plant. That's also fine. But you don't have to be stuck to just that particular plant, but please stay within the plant species so that we can, when we enter the data, we know which species the data are for.
And then another clarification, if a group has, you know, a group of kids come through and they have 10 kids all look at snap beans that day, all of that data, you still want it, right?
Yep. Yeah, that's great because it gives us additional data points, and we try not to resample the same leaves, but if they get resampled, that's okay. You know, we account for that in the way that we do our analyses, that some of these leaves might be resampled. And so, you know, those are the kinds of things that we're trying to account for in a statistical sense, because we want to make the data collection as easy and straightforward as possible for people. And we know that, you know, with citizen science data, it is going to be a little messy, but having 10 or 20 data points from, you know, I mean, say you're only growing cutleaf coneflower, which I know the National Park Service is, you know, that was at least at Rocky Mountain National Park, that's the only bioindicator plant that they have planted. And so, you know, you can have 20 entries for cutleaf coneflower. It's still useful. When I have groups come to NCAR, I usually try to get at least some people to collect data on some of the different plants. You know, so I say, if we can have, you know, let's have some of you split up and make sure that some of you get the coneflower, some of you get the milkweed, you get the snap bean, and some of you get the potato, because those are the 4 plants that we have here. And that way I at least have some people collecting data from all of those plants. So that's, I mean, to me, that's useful, but whatever works for your site is, I think, what you need to do. But data are useful so that we can sort of see how these patterns are emerging through space and then also through time, both sort of within a season and then across years.
Danica, I missed when you hit this drop down for the species. Did it include sensitive and tolerant varieties?
It does not for the snap beans, but I could ask him to add that.
Because most of the gardens we've been working with have both, and so
I can. Please. I feel like I should have a piece of paper and just write to remind myself. So
if they see injury, damage on the tolerant.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's something that I can ask, and I think that's, you know, this hasn't been widely tested across gardens, and so there's probably still going to be things that we need to adjust or update. And so please just email me if you don't see a species that's in there, or if you're having trouble with something, and we can try and get it figured out. But that's a good point. You know, we can separate the tolerant and the sensitive snap bean. I think here he just included the species that the gardens that are affiliated with the National Park Service in Great Smokies are using.
We just had a question about the tobacco, which I'm saying we talked about that yesterday, so hopefully we'll get that on there shortly.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Other questions? All right, well, it's just about 11 o'clock, so we can let everybody go, but really appreciate you joining our call, and if you have questions in the future, please let us know. We can send out both the recording of this call, the slides, and also the ICP vegetation app website for folks if they're interested in that, and then if there's other information that you would like that we didn't include, that we didn't get to, please let us know.
Great, and we'll also try to have meetups like this, possibly not every month, but maybe every couple of months over the season, so people can touch base.
Yeah, I guess that was one thing that I had intended to ask is, how do people are meetings useful to people, and how frequently? I guess, I would think that we don't need to meet super frequently, but if people would like to meet more regularly, we can also try to arrange that. But maybe we can meet again sort of in the middle or sort of later in the growing season, so that people can start to ask more questions about their gardens in particular, and or share other resources that are available.
Yeah.
I think it'd be nice, yeah, over the summer, maybe we could just do like a picture sharing, sort of like in person, not in person, but virtual discussion.
Yeah.
So that way it's not just like, one person providing feedback on the photos, but we could also discuss of like, if it wasn't ozone damage, what else could it have been? Or I don't know. It would be helpful for me, I think.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, maybe people can submit photos and we can go through and sort of look at what is ozone damage, what isn't, those kinds of things.
Okay.
Hi, this is Jane Metcalf, and we're just trying to get our garden started. So it would be, I don't know if there's a time when we could get some advice from people in getting it started. I have some questions that I'd like to get answered, and maybe I could do that over email. But I find these conference calls really, really helpful.
Oh, good. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have specific questions right now that you had been
Well,
wondering?
they're very kind of, granular. I don't want to bug people with them, but maybe I'll send you an email with some.
Okay. There are several other folks on the call who are starting gardens this year, so some of your questions might be helpful for them as well.
Well, we're still looking for a location. That's been the hardest part for us, is finding the right location.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Well, I'm happy to talk, and I'm sure Erica and also.
Donica, there was actually a question earlier about how, like, planting too close together.
Oh, yes.
If that, has an effect on the ozone or the plants. So kind of what's your thoughts on how close things could or shouldn't be?
Yeah, well, I mean, these are all great questions. I think there's a lot of things to think about in terms of planting too close. So plants, if they're shading each other out, that could impact how much ozone damage they're getting, because leaves that are shaded tend to have smaller pore opening size, and so they're going to get less ozone inside their leaf, and so shaded leaves aren't going to exhibit as much ozone damage, like usually. But then there's also, if they're competing for water and nutrient resources, then there's also that sort of component to it that those interactions will also impact ozone damage. But I would also say that for people to come and look at the ozone damage, having the plants planted closely together makes it hard for people to sort of get in and look at particular plants and to walk around them to be able to see. So sometimes it's nice to have a little bit of space. Some of our plants, like the coneflower and the milkweed, grow rhizomally, and so they will just start sending up shoots in a lot of different places, and so they will just naturally start growing closer and closer together as well. So one thing to be aware of, I need to actually dig up a bunch of milkweed or cut it out of our garden here at NCAR this year, because it's starting to take over the whole garden space. It's hard to get rid of.
So I see some questions where people want to know the answers to these questions and, want to hear other people's questions. They don't want to be left out. So I'm going to propose something. We have the capacity to set up a Moodle, an online workspace, where we can post all these things. We can post the recordings, and it has a discussion forum where everybody can be subscribed to it. And we'll set up an account, and then if people ask questions through that online workspace, everybody sees the question, and you can respond to it, and everybody will see the answer, and you can do it asynchronously, so we don't have to always be on a webinar.
Right.
Yeah.
So
that
we'll
would be really helpful.
Set that up in the next week.
Yeah, that sounds like a great idea. Maybe we can, I wonder if maybe we can send that out with the meeting follow-up notes and all of that kind of stuff as well.
That's a great idea.
It's easy enough to get set up.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Absolutely.
We can do that.
All right.
All right.
Okay, well, thank you again, everyone. And yeah, please let us know if you have additional questions. And